Welcome back. We have The Secret of the Golden Flower, and we're going to start on chapter 8, The Magic Spell for a Far Journey. But it's been a bit of a journey between the last time we hung out, Daniel. Let's catch up. How you been? What you been up to?
Oh, wow. Let's see. Wasn't prepared for that question. um, I, I've been really well. Yeah. Just doing my best to stay in a good routine. I've been really contemplating on this concept in Ayurveda, Jyotish, where the three sattvic luminaries, which are the sun, the moon, and Jupiter, all represent and rule a different aspect of our health. And the sun rules the time aspect of our health and daily rhythms and routines that bring us into a healthy orientation to time and also to our daily regiment. And then the moon is rules our senses. So it rules how we're taking in information from our senses and how we're using our senses. And our senses can bring us great diversity in our experience and health and vitality through the enhancement that they bring. But they can also bring a variety of difficulties as well. And then the final one is Jupiter, which represents our relationship to our physical body and the space that our body occupies and how we feel about the space of our bodies. And so it's really about listening to your body and really being receptive to what your body's wanting and needing. And so I've been really contemplating on these three sattvic luminaries and how they impact health. And yeah, so the last week and a half, I've really been noticing my son particularly, really trying to get more by the clock, so to say, very regimented with my lifestyle. And even if it's just a few things a day really helps me anchor to the clock in a mindful, healthy way. So that's been something that I've been feeling and ruminating on.
Interesting. Cool. So the sun represents time. When I first thought of time, I thought of like the inevitable death, but you're mostly, when you talk about the sun, you're talking about sort of regimenting the use of your time.
Well, interestingly, so there is kind of a yin yang situation with the sun and Saturn. Saturn is that which takes time away, and the sun is that which brings life into time. And so in that way, they're always working kind of in opposite directions. Saturn is always bringing us closer to the moment of death, while the sun is trying to invigorate us in time so that we have life. Mm-hmm. But yes, they both represent time in a way. But yes, the sun, generally speaking, is referred to as a life-giving source of time.
Sure. And then the moon is the senses, is what you're saying? Mm-hmm. And so how does that have to do with your health?
What my Ayurveda teacher says is the improper use of the senses is what's called a crime against wisdom. So for instance, and a good example of how somebody might not use their senses super well, let's say they are feeling a little feverish, as opposed to resting the eyes, which rules the fire in the body, which is associated with the eyes. As opposed to doing that, they are doing something very stimulating to the eyes, such as watching like a TV with like a sports show on, where they're having to track the ball all around the field, or something that's very like a movie even that has like a lot of fighting or action scenes in it. Or like, let's say they're outside and just in the bright sun, not taking care of their eyes. In this way, it can actually activate the fever more. Mm-hmm. In the same way, like, let's say a pitta issue is starting to arise, as opposed to being out in the sun or being very stimulated by your environment, you're in a very let's call it dull environment for the senses, particularly the eyesight or your sense of sight. So maybe even resting the eyes, even like this meditation that we're talking about, just slowly lowering the eyelids, really relaxing the sense of vision, that will then, as opposed to having this outward flowing energy, the energy then can start to turn inwards, and start to nourish the body, the fires of the body.
Oh, that's really cool.
And tend to it. Yeah, and so in the same way, all of the senses work in a similar way. Like for instance, just one other example is if somebody is dealing with a lot of psychosis symptoms, this relates to the space element. So they're unable to put things in their parts to then make sense of them in the context of their own lives. And this in some ways is getting into the territory of Jupiter,
Right.
but it also has to do with the senses as well in terms of our spatial understanding. So something such as just doing like a nice spatial organization of, even if it's just a little area where they feel good in their space, where everything has its part, everything makes sense, and then slowly being that as like the center of the yantra, then starting to go out from there to then organize little other aspects of their life, so that then they can start to feel this harmonious quality of the space element. And two, they're sorting out their own internal experience as well. And so a way that the space element can get disorganized is if you're always in a cluttered space or disorganized space, these kinds of things, it actually does affect our physical health, because it impacts our mind, which is ruled by the moon, and rules the waters of the body, which inherently is associated with so many different detoxification processes. So it's actually not a what's the word, metaphysical concept. It's a very much a physiological concept.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah, so it sounds like there's a little bit of overlap, at least in the sense of the senses with the spatial aspects overlapping with Jupiter. And yeah, it just makes me, as you're describing the senses as fires, the idea of karmendriyas, ultimately your organs of action. Indra represents the enkindler. And so, as you say, if a crime against wisdom would be sort of inflaming one of those karmendriyas, or and thereby creating trouble in the gyanendriyas, or the organ of knowledge, which is ultimately like the ability to smell, or the ability to see, or the ability to perceive, whether you're looking inside or out. Very cool.
Yeah, and just one distinction between how Jupiter as the form of jiva is separate from the sense of space found within the moon archetype of the senses, is that jiva, or Jupiter, represents our physical body and how we're associating with the space of our body. So it's very much about, like, this meditation is a perfect example of how one can be in relationship with their jiva, or their innate wisdom found within their body, by resting the point of consciousness or focus inside the body. Also, a great example is Vipassana style meditation, where one is actively circulating the light using this point of focus that starts at the tip of the nose, that then eventually migrates throughout the whole nervous system. That is also another great example of how one can use this listening to the body as a source of healing. And people, it's interesting, people that don't have a strong Jupiter in their chart, or a Jupiter that's particularly in a house that is aspected by malefics, or there's a bunch of malefics in the same house as Jupiter, that's where it comes out the strongest, is where people necessarily shouldn't be listening to this innate bodily wisdom, because the innate bodily wisdom might be telling them to do things that maybe isn't the best for their body. So
Really?
it gets all into all these kind of fine details.
Oh, that seems like a really deep topic right there then. So who do you trust then?
Well, who do you trust is you externalize this this construct onto a tradition that is holding this Jupiter, this healthy form of Jupiter. And you do what they say as opposed to what your body says. Because, like there's this trend right now around what's the word? Instinctual eating, where people are just eating whatever their body's instincts are telling them to.
Yes, right.
Or instinctual healthcare, where it feels right, so I'm going to do that. This feels right, so I'm going to do that. And because that's what my body wants. That's what it's saying it wants. So in some situations, it can be dangerous and almost as a fallacy because of the negative combinations of Jupiter, or the combinations that are associated with Jupiter in the chart.
And this can be kind of confirmed by looking at their chart and seeing that it's maybe unfriendly or malefic or afflicted in some way or another.
Exactly.
Interesting.
It's more so an affliction. Direct aspects of multiple malefics, not just one malefic, but multiple.
Huh. Wow, that's definitely interesting. Well,
and then for the sun and the moon, same thing. Like, seeing the strength of the sun, how well are they in relationship to the time aspects of their life? Their moon, how well are they in relationship with the proper use of their senses and their organs of action, as you specified. Mm-hmm. And getting very fine-tuned with that. Mm-hmm. But anyway, thanks for being interested, man.
Yeah, no, that's just like almost makes me want to talk about a whole new thing, but that's cool. We'll have to put that on a bookmark.
Yeah, I'm learning these techniques right now, so it'd be awesome to check out your chart at some point and go through it in detail.
Absolutely. Gosh, that's just because another aspect of that is just this idea of trusting yourself. And sometimes it's like, no. Sometimes you shouldn't trust yourself. You should trust something that is has been proven. And gosh, it's really interesting and twisted. Not twisted in a bad way, but just like it's twisting my perception. So
right. And this is why the guru, the teacher archetype is so important still in contemporary culture. Not where you have to see that person as having the answers for every single question that you ask and they must know, and you're putting them like on this unrealistic pedestal, but more so you're bowing to their wisdom that they in this particular topic. Because you can have multiple gurus,
for sure.
in a variety of different topics. Your health guru can be a totally different guru than your Sanskrit guru to your Jyotish guru to your Ayurveda guru. But in this particular topic, there is a humbling to a source of knowledge that is beyond your current situation of comprehension.
So are these, and then just as a side question, are these interdependent, or is there a hierarchy to the sun, moon, Jupiter thing? Like, is the because I'm inclined to think that the Jiva would be ruling over the other two, but it sounds more like maybe that's not the case.
Well, the soul is also defined through the sun as Atma, so it's the impersonalized soul, while the Jiva is the personalized soul that is eventually merging into the highest soul. So in this way, they both have this God essence archetype within them. And then the moon is the one that is in the middle, in a way that's much more in flow, in fluctuation, because of its transits through all the nakshatras and also the tithis that it moves through. So the moon is constantly in this flux state. And so because of that, the moon isn't necessarily the one to consider as the proper king archetype, right? It is always considered the secondary archetype. But what's the king? Is the sun or Jupiter? I think that is the one that is still debated. Personally, for me, because Jupiter is much stronger in my chart, I find there's a lot more comfort in sources of wisdom and knowledge that do not feel as exacting and demanding as the sun does. And perhaps that's because the sun is also very weak in my chart, right? So it's different for each person depending upon their relationships with these planets.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
So for you, if you don't mind me sharing,
Sure.
you have a beautiful sun in Pisces, right? So, for you, that this sense of time and order and exacting and, this way of scheduling your day brings you a lot of wisdom and brings you a lot of comfort. In a way, for me, it feels more of like a chore, something that I know I need to do, but something that I don't necessarily enjoy doing. While for me, this Jupiter archetype that is allowing all the timing elements of my life to be secondary to the wisdom aspects of my life, and for me, that can potentially hurt me in this time realm, in a way that it might not affect your health as much or your rhythms. So in the same way, and so the difference between our Jupiters too is potentially I have a parivartana with my moon, which is in the 6th house, which is all about health and interest in health. And also it's because maybe it also rules bad habits and disease and these kinds of things, right? So there's, but because it's so it's very sattvic because it's in a parivartana, meaning it's switching signs with Jupiter. In the 10th, I am naturally inclined towards studying healthy traditional systems of traditional health, to help me through this obsession or interest in these topics. So for somebody that doesn't have that combination, for instance, that has a Jupiter like yours is in Libra, this spiritual context for you is very much more in the realm of stories and metaphors, because it's ruled by this air sign and is very much in this eclectic esoteric realm. And so therefore you derive wisdom in that way. And so how that refers to your sense of self in the body, well, for you, I would say the sense of self in the body is more found through this moon and sun archetype, than potentially with this Jupiter archetype, which is always potentially even trying to take you out of the body and creating this whole story, this whole pageantry of your dynamic, of the exploration of the mythos and the world of archetype and story. So in that way, the embodied kind of innately wisdom, self is very much interested in these extracurricular ideas, and how they fit in the body doesn't maybe always make as much sense as maybe the sun, for instance, who knows exactly his place in the body, and the moon for you knows exactly their place in the body, so I'm not sure if that answers your question.
No, but it only stirs more questions, but we do have to eventually get started on the text. Wow, that was really insightful though. Thank you. And yeah, I think it's a great segue into this journey, that this magic spell, because the journey goes on. So without further ado, a magic spell for the far journey. Master Lu Tzu said, Yu Jing has left behind him a magic spell for the far journey. 4 words crystallize the spirit in the space of energy. In the 6th month, white snow is suddenly seen to fly. At the 3rd watch, the sun's disk sends out blinding rays. In the water blows wind of the gentle. Wandering in heaven, one eats the spirit energy of the receptive. And the still deeper secret of the secret, the land that is nowhere, that is the true home. These verses are full of mystery. The meaning is, the most important things in the great Tao are the words, actions through non-action. Non-action prevents a man from becoming entangled in form and image, materiality. Action in non-action prevents a man from sinking into numbing emptiness and dead nothingness. The effect depends entirely on the central one. The releasing of the effect is in the two eyes. The two eyes are like the pole of the great wane which turns the whole of creation. They cause the poles of light and darkness to circulate. The elixir depends from beginning to end on one thing, the metal in the midst of the water, that is, the lead in the water region. Heretofore, we have spoken of the circulation of the light, indicating thereby the initial release, which works from without upon which lies within. This is to aid one in obtaining the master. It is for pupils in the beginning stages. They go through the two lower transitions in order to gain the upper one. After the sequence of events is clear and the nature of the release is known, heaven no longer withholds the way, but reveals the ultimate truth. Disciples, keep it secret and redouble your effort. The circulation of the light is the inclusive term. The further the works advance, the more does the golden flower bloom. But there is a still more marvelous kind of circulation. Till now we have worked from the outside on what is within. Now we stay in the center and rule what is external. Hitherto it was a service and aid of the master. Now it is a dissemination of the commands of the master. The whole relationship is now reversed. If one wants to penetrate the more subtle regions by this method, one must first see to it that body and heart are completely controlled, that one is quite free and at peace, letting go of all entanglements, untroubled by the slightest excitement, and with the heavenly heart exactly in the middle. Then let one lower the lids of the two eyes as if one received a holy edict, a summons to become the minister. Who would dare disobey? Then with both eyes, one illumines the house of the abysmal. Wherever the golden flower goes, the true light of polarity comes forth to meet it. The clinging brightness is bright outside and dark within. This is the body of the creative. The one dark enters and becomes master. The result is that the heart develops independence on things, is directed outward, and is tossed about on the stream. When the rotating light shines towards what is within, it does not develop independence on things. The energy of the dark is fixed, and the golden flower shines concentratedly. This is then the collected light of polarity. Related things attract each other. Thus, the polarized light line of the abysmal presses upward. It is not only the light in the abyss, but it is the creative light which meets creative light. As soon as these two substances meet each other, they unite inseparably, and there develops an unceasing life. It comes and goes, rises and falls of itself, and in the house of the primal energy. One is aware of effulgence and infinity. The whole body feels light and would like to fly. This is the state of which it is said, clouds fill 1,000 mountains. Gradually, it goes and to and fro quite softly. It rises and falls imperceptibly. The pulse stands still and breathing stops. This is the moment of true creative union, the state of which it is said, the moon gathers up the 10,000 waters. In the midst of this darkness, the heavenly heart suddenly begins a movement. This is the return of the one light, the time when the child comes to life. However, the details of this must be carefully explained. When a person looks at something, listens to something, eyes and ears move and follow the things until they have passed. These movements are all underlings, and when the heavenly ruler follows them in their task, it means to live together with demons. If now during this moment and every moment of rest, a person lives together with people and not with demons, then the heavenly ruler is the true man. When he moves and we move with him, then the movement is the root of heaven. When he is quiet and we are quiet with him, then this quietness is the cave of the moon. When he unceasingly alternates movement and rest, go on with him unceasingly in movement and quietness. When he rises and falls with inhaling and exhaling, rise and fall with him. That is what is going to and fro between the root of heaven and the cave of the moon. We'll stop here. We're about halfway through this section. There's a lot there. Wow. Let's go back to the beginning and take a look at some of these things that stick out. Action through non-action and non-action through action. What does that mean to you?
Relinquishing the fruits of one's action is a very clear, concise path to know source consciousness.
And the rest of this poem is very interesting as well. In the 6th month, white snow is suddenly seen to fly.
Could also be a reference to the seasons in a particular area of China based upon when their new year is. But also the 6th, it could have another implication that I just don't fully understand.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to look at other translations on that part. The way that things change in vernacular can really obfuscate the intention, especially when we're talking about esoteric things that sort of by definition beat around the bush, because you can't really approach it directly.
Right.
But I can't deny that even just reading these things without knowing them, it stirs something within. Mm-hmm. At the 3rd watch, the sun's disk sends out blinding rays. My first thought would be the 3rd watch seems like it would be like the 1st watch would be from evening until midnight. The 2nd watch would be like the middle of the night. The 3rd watch would be from night until dawn, perhaps. In the water blows the wind of the gentle, wandering in heaven, one eats the spirit energy of the receptive.
There is a wandering in heaven. So there is a proclamation that there is an arrival in heaven. And in heaven, there is a spirit energy that can be consumed. And the energy is from the receptive. So what image comes to mind is the more that this meditation happens, this light grows and grows until the moment there is this connection of creative energy, the light of creative energy. And at that point, there's a free flow of this light frequency that potentially can go right up to heaven. And once you're already in heaven, the energy of the receptive, of the person willing to receive this light energy, then now is available in heaven. So there's an aspect of mortality. There's a concept of a singularity of life that's achievable through heaven, but it's only because of the good work and merit of those in a body that were able to be in this state. for long periods of time.
And then the land that is nowhere, that is the true home.
It really
Thing
is.
that
Wait,
what
I saw
grabs
that.
me there is a saying from Chogyam Trungpa. The the bad news is you're in free fall. The good news is there is no ground. There's nothing to grab onto. This sort of meditation is amazingly direct, and yet the directness requires so many words to try and describe it, because there's nothing you can really say about it. And now they begin. The circulation of the light is the inclusive term. The further work advances, and now we're getting into the beginning of what happens as the pole within our focus becomes stabilized. As we were talking before we started recording, it seems that there's a process of the silence that you're focusing on that, as it stabilizes, creates a harmonic or a potential for a next unfolding. Till now, we have worked on the outside within, working within. So in other words, we've been training ourselves to practice pratyahara, the turning inward of the senses, and stopping this compulsion of seeking outward, which is formidable. That was one of the things I was meditating on a couple nights ago, was sitting outside. I'd be hearing things, and in the deep stillness, it's kind of startling to hear something, and you're like, oh boy, well, what's out there? And I reminded myself, whatever is out there is not as important and as intense as the reality that's in here. And that's not always the case, but when I'm meditating, I'm really trying to intensify the focus within to the exclusion of everything else. And that seems like a good mantra for me to remind myself that, yes, it's important to have the ability to hear things outside, but right now it's the time to do the opposite and really focus on, this is more important. This is more important. I don't want to be the squirrel meditator.
Yeah.
So then we go through some of these. So I just want to jump to the part where it says, these movements are all underlings, and when the heavenly ruler follows them in their task, it means to live together with demons. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, if the unconscious isn't fully addressed and brought into the light, you'll always be carrying some sort of impurity. What about you?
What comes to mind to me is the story of Solomon and how he built the temple by employing demons. So in one thing that we have to remember is that good does not eradicate evil, and demons will never be been rid of. The world, we only know what's good because there's something to compare it against. We only know contrast because of the variety. The reason why demons are considered trouble and problems and bad is because we know that when they are not put in the right place, they cause trouble. We don't get the results. They cause more pain and they cause more suffering than what is necessary or due. So a big part of these meditative processes is to put them in their place. You're never going to get rid of them. In the same way that you're never going to get rid of fear, we just develop a resilience to it, a courageous volition that helps us overcome it in our pursuit of something good.
Yeah, this reminds me also of the gargoyles that are often depicted outside of churches as the protectors of the threshold, the doorways.
Mhm. Right,
And
right.
in that way, they're really serving their role.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so to me, what it means is the heavenly ruler has done he's become the master, and as master, he's also master of the lower worlds. And so through that
Mm-hmm.
that ability of being not dependent, because when the rotating light shines towards that which is it was in, it does not develop on dependence on things. So the dependence is the key word here. Our meditation becomes renounced of the effects that the demonic forces can play upon us, because it doesn't have anything to grab onto. If now during every moment and every moment of rest, a person lives together with people and not with demons, then the heavenly ruler is the true man. So to me, that is the idea of having animosity, living with animus towards other people, means that we're demonizing people. All of a sudden, you're representing something. I'm not seeing you as a person. I'm seeing you as some demon that ultimately I haven't confronted in myself yet. And whatever you resist will persist.
This is a very essential point right here.
A very essential point.
Yeah, this is very essential.
I mean, tell me if I'm off base here, but this, to me, this is pretty clear.
So when you say that there's nothing for them to hold on to, how is this possible? When there's still parts of ourselves that are in this resonance, this vibrational reset, or not, it's as if in the same way, the creative light principle merges with this creative light principle, and then therefore a flow of this light frequency then can start to be this this uninterrupted creative impulse of source consciousness. In the same way, if we're having judgmental thinking about other people, or if we're in a state of inner contradiction or hypocrisy, particularly when we have these high lofty ideals, yet there is parts of ourselves that are still playing catch up, so to say, and grasping on to moralistic pursuits, or virtue signaling, or whatever it
Sure.
is, to
Right.
appear to be something, but internally we're actually experiencing deceit, judgment, contradiction,
Right.
like this.
Totally. Great question. And I don't have an easy answer. Actually, I do have an easy answer for it, but I can't claim to have that ability. I think the best thing to do in those circumstances is to not make things worse. It's when you feel triggered, do everything you can to be as objective as possible, and not not mean, and not projective, not putting that projection on that person. And that's very hard. And sometimes that means I have to just say, I just feel triggered right now, and I don't really feel like I'm able to talk about this, or this, doing whatever I can, using all of my creative capacity to somehow restrain that urge, and try and confront it in my meditation instead. And again, I think that's a very subjective thing. That's a very personal approach. As we were talking about earlier, each person has a different chart, and that chart gives them different ways of dealing with those adversaries, those inner adversaries. So Do you have anything to add to that, or do you have another solution?
So for me, the image that comes to mind is that those demons are inside the temple, and they are and you're trying to prevent them from coming out the door,
Yeah.
from attacking people, right? Because they're in the temple, they're in there, they're in with all the worshipers of the divine. But how do you get them outside the temple to protect it, and so they actually know their place? Like, how do we get to the point where we're not even having to do this self-monitoring and, you know, emotional regulation, where there's something inherently stifled about not expressing ourselves? And, you know, and I agree, it's not good to have difficult conversations when one is feeling difficult experience or is experiencing difficult emotions. I totally agree with you there and totally hear you. And but just from a metaphor point of view, what would it actually mean for those demons to stand guard at the door and really have their role be clearly defined? And potentially it's, well, I'm kind of answering my own question right now, but
Go ahead.
maybe it has to do with this. I've often heard the sun, you know, whenever there's demons, to send them to the sun, because the sun knows how to burn them, and only the sun really knows how to deal with the demons. And so in the same way, they need this strong ruler to know that, you know, this is where you go, this is where you don't go. You know, and this kind of inner authority that helps tame these energies.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's something to do with that, where the more and it's not the same type of discipline Saturn is.
Oh, it's different,
It's
because
different.
it has to be life affirming. And really the
Yeah.
sun is the life affirming source. And so I think that in the sense of creation, we all realize that the whole all form of life comes from that source, good and bad. And so I think that entity, that sun character, because he is the life giver, he has the authority to command both. And so that sense of intensity, he knows the language, so to speak, to tell the demons what to do. And they do it, because without him, they wouldn't be. So
I like that. There's a song that you would absolutely love that's coming to mind right now, which is all about Archangel Michael. And it's interesting, right? Because Archangel Michael is often depicted as the exalted form of Mars. But similar to Hanumanji, when he serves Lord Ram, when Hanumanji serves Lord Ram, or when Archangel Michael serves Jesus Christ the Redeemer as the sun archetype, they merge into that archetype and become the sun.
Yeah.
And there's this song about being the chief of the house, and I am here to command. And it's just a great song.
It's cool.
Yeah. And then the next phrase is, this is the house of God. This is the house of God.
Mm-hmm.
I am chief of this house, and I am here to command. And there's other verses as well, but I think you would really like it. And it just totally is reminding me of this archetype. And similarly, the same tradition where this song came from, they have a demon archetype that's welcomed as a deity in the church. But the rule of this demon archetype is to protect the doorway of the church, and has a very similar iconography in a way as Lord Ganesh, as the original shaman, that protects all the doorways, all the entrances into the body, and rules the number 9, which rules all the thresholds of the body too.
Right.
So it's the protector of all of the entrances and exits of the body, which is where the demon wants to be, to protect the physical divine heart from any sort of outside forces entering into the sacred center. Interesting. Yeah, that's super good. Okay, thanks.
So there's that just made me think of Bhutapsarana, and there's a mantra that's for dispelling hostile forces and invoking friendly forces. And there's 3 mantras, and it says, "O friendly forces existing in the world by the order of supreme goodness, Shiva, Dispel and destroy the obstacles cast by hostile forces. Oh, unfriendly forces, disembodied spirits. And this is where we take some black sesame seeds and we throw them in the 10 directions. Oh, unfriendly forces, disembodied spirits, ruiners of the body, forces of division, and power hungry. Bhuta, Preta, Pisachascha, Danava, Rakshasaschiye. Those are all those demonic forces.
Mm-hmm.
All of you be brought to peace by accepting this offering of mine. So this is what we do to create a sanctified space so that when these demons come, they don't come to us. They come, hey, this is for you. Here, you take those things. Now leave me alone.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, oh, scatterers of coherence, ruiners of the body, the power hungry, the cold-blooded slitherers, all of you be dispelled by the strikes of Vishnu's incarnation as man lion. So if you don't take that offering, then Vishnu's man lion's gonna cut you up. And that's where, again, we have he's very much the archetype of the sun. He's a very wrathful archetype of the sun. Who knows the language that they'll adhere to.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's great. Yeah. I love that so much.
It's very cool. You know, these things, oftentimes when we bring up words like demon or Satan, these immediately, like, I know people just like they we shake, we kind of get petrified, even if just a little bit, just by bringing up the name. And a lot of these ancient traditions are tantric in nature, in the sense that they deal with these things. These are a big part of progressing towards the goal, has to do with dealing with the obstacles that are inevitably going to be there. So by not mentioning them, or by just pretending they don't exist, doesn't make the path easier. There's a progress of integration and putting things in their place so that things can happen more smoothly without the need of excessive conflict. Like back in the day, two armies came together and they both were like, God, I don't want to have to fight you. What they would do is they would both pick their best warrior to save the army, the bloodshed, and just have the best two warriors battle it out. And that, in some ways, it's a more intelligent way. If you have to fight, then at least fight intelligently.
Interesting. Yeah, I love this line of conversation, and bringing it back to the context of these meditations, which are in silence. Wow, so much can happen in silence internally. And often when you were using that squirrel metaphor, like, oh, squirrel, it reminded me how the mind would rather do anything but confront this concept, where there are these forces within us that are inherently feeling like they're pulling us apart in these different directions. But how to offer internally, just like with the sesame seeds, there's aspects of ourself that really want to be acknowledged and heard and seen, and how it's not an easy process to differentiate these two polarities, but there can be congruence there, and there needs to be, in order to really reach these levels of attainment that it's describing here in the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it by no means, I'm not trying to overly simplify, because this stuff is very circumstantial to everyone's path and in their life. But this is a method, and this is a path of moving through these difficulties in a way that someone's done it before and it worked. And it's, at least I'm convinced, it's clear that whoever wrote this is very, not just skilled in writing, but is speaking from an experiential perspective.
Yeah, agreed.
The last part actually is, I think, my favorite part, just because of
Uh-huh.
the descriptions. When he is quiet, so when he moves, we move with him. So this is describing this connection to the creative source. Our meditation has gone from making ourselves potent within to finally connecting through that potency, popping out and connecting with that primal spirit. And now that we're connected with that primal spirit, that is the governor of our actions. That ruler moves, we move with him. And then the movement is the root of heaven. It's just beautiful. When he is quiet, we are quiet with him. Then this quietness is the cave of the moon. And just basically talking about your description of the moon in the beginning of our conversation, I think ties in really well with that, with our senses and with our general perception when we see the way that the Supreme sees. It's a very convincing, very profound conception.
I love that. The foundation is this silence. And what it reminds me of is how in the Tiffies, there's these different phases of the moon, and this loudness or this excitement that's often depicted with the full moon, and the full moon being the peak of our lunacy, the peak of something, of our consciousness towards the expansive possibility of what the creative potential could be. But there isn't a quietness about the full moon.
Yeah, whatever it is, we're full of it.
It's full of it. Yeah, and then as the moon starts to wane, then the cave of the heart, the moon returns to, which is the new moon, which is always depicted in the heart. And so for folks that are really wanting to start a contemplative, silent practice, I always recommend for them to start at the new moon for just this reason, because at the new moon, it's much easier to drop into a state of receptivity and silence, because all of the creative processes that are on this earth are governed by the moon. And so therefore, everything is inherently within this state more naturally anyway. And it can be more cave-like in there. And the senses can also withdraw internally much easier at that time as well. And so in terms of how the body is able to stay, the body, mind, and spirit are able to stay in resonance is when these senses are given time to really rest. And so this also has a very, people are always talking about all of the health benefits of meditation and how it can actually it really can show up in a physiological way. And I think getting these fine-tuned details, even in association with the moon, you might not have a calm heart at a full moon when you're trying to be silent. It might be time to go sing to the divine.
That's a great description too, because we're talking about the full moon is so devotive. And because it's full of it, whereas a new moon is very introverted and contemplative. Never thought of it that way, but yeah, it's really good. It's really interesting stuff. Wow. Well, that takes us halfway through the chapter 8 of The Secret of the Golden Flower. We'll pick up with the paragraph that starts with "When the heavenly heart still preserves calm," and it'll be another couple pages, and I think that is the end. That is the end of it. The next one just goes to the summary of the Chinese concepts. So we're rapidly approaching the end, and boy, I feel like I've learned a lot along the way. Much assisted by you, and thanks for that.
Likewise.
But yeah, I guess for now, let's sign off. Thanks for watching, everyone. And oh my gosh, there's a bird. He was like so close to me. All
Awesome.
right. Well, yeah, we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.